Hello and welcome to this episode of the Alien Familiar Podcast. I am Clayton, and going around the table...
Not Beth, actually. You're not sitting next to each other this time. I'm Kyle Perkins. Hello.
This is Beth.
KD.
Nina Richner.
And Nina Smith.
How are we going to differentiate? Because we've got KP and KD.
Just call me Lenina. It'll work out a little easier.
I think the biggest obstacle to that will be us remembering.
Mm-hmm.
But today, once we get our names straight, we will be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. The great games that we've been in and the pieces of shit games that we've been in. And we're going to be starting with the bad and the ugly.
You gotta start somewhere, you gotta build up.
I still wanted to call this episode Tales from the Dice Bag, but that was better, Clayton. That was better.
Clayton's a dice bag.
The man assembled.
Get enough espresso there, buddy?
Yep.
So I'm going to go ahead and start because I have a tale about an experience I had where I was absolutely miserable for 5 straight hours. But my players, oh my god, they had the time of their lives. This was a couple of years ago. I was running a game for a few individuals who had only ever played one other one-shot with me. It was for my brother-in-law and some of his friends. This game has gone down in history as being called The 4 Idiots of the Apocalypse. This was a title they gave this session after it was over because of all of the just poor decision-making that went down on the character's fault, on the player's fault, and I was miserable the whole time, but they had the best time that I've seen a group of players new to the game have.
I feel like that's kind of a trend, is either, ideally both the players and the game master having fun, but when shit hits the fan, either the game master's having fun and the players aren't, or the game master hates his or her life and the players are just having a ball.
So I was running just this zombie apocalypse in a fantasy world. The 4 idiots of the apocalypse, they were just happened to be coming by and come to rescue the town. Some of the information about this session I didn't find out until later. Things were going well until, comes to find out, one of the players managed to sneak a peek at my game master notes while I went to the bathroom.
Uh-oh.
That's low.
I had just printed out a bunch of characters from the Savagepedia, a Savage Worlds Wikipedia, that I would recommend anyone use if they're playing Savage Worlds. I just printed out a bunch of characters from there to use as my NPCs. They already had the stats down. I just changed... Well, I didn't even change the names. I just printed straight out from what was there. Therein laid the problem, because I didn't change the name of Necromancer Wizard. I was just using the stats. They saw Necromantic Wizard, and this was one of the first NPCs that they had come across, and they immediately just kill this person in the middle of town in front of everybody else. And this was supposed to be the wizard who was the protector of the people. He was the one maintaining the shell that was keeping the undead from swarming into the town.
I love this story so much.
So they murder this guy who has been the benevolent protector. Everybody runs into the nearest church, screaming in fear. These people charge into the church. I have no idea what possessed them to do this at the time, but they just started slaughtering townspeople.
Oh.
Kingsman style.
Yes.
Was there a Skinner song playing in the background? Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. One round later, in the process of them just slaughtering whichever innocent townsfolk was nearby, I stopped asking for dice rolls. I just let them go around and just tell how they were just killing everyone. No rolls necessary. You guys were supposed to be the big damn heroes, but you're the big damn villains now.
Oh my god.
Twist.
They succeed in killing every living person in the town, but they've still got the undead army outside, battering the walls of this church. through the adventure, they manage to find out where the source of this evil was. They go down into this big mansion / crypt underneath of it. They find the source of the evil, and they discover that there is a demon trying to cross over into the real world. They find a book full of the incantations that are being used to allow this to happen. There is nobody around to actually complete this ritual, because originally I had it planned that one of the townspeople was this person doing this, but whenever they decided to just fuck with my storyline, I just tossed my storyline out and decided just to run with it as far as it'll go. So all the stuff was there, it's just they didn't find out what was going on. So for some reason they got the brilliant idea of, let's go ahead and finish this ritual that will bring this demon into the world. So they go to complete this ritual, and in the culmination of this ritual, they have to sacrifice someone. They've already killed every living person in the town. So it comes down to drawing straws as to who is going to be the person to die. They draw straws, they kill the person, and the person performing the ritual has the demon come into their mind and tell them, do you accept me as part of you? Because the demon needs to use a host body in this world. The person who does the ritual and has the demon speak to him, at this point, when the demon asks, do you accept me into your body? He says, no. The entire ritual fails. There is a single dead PC sitting there.
What was his
For no
sacrifice
reason.
worth?
One of the player characters mercifully just runs out into the big army of undead because he thinks everything is fucked, so he just tries to run. Don't even narrate beyond him getting beyond the sight of all the other player characters. He's just gone. We're left with 2 player characters now.
2 idiots, if you will.
Yes, we still have 2 of the 4 idiots of the apocalypse. And they still want to do the ritual.
The one who ran was the one who said no, I assume?
No, he was dead.
I think one just gave up.
No, they killed the one guy, and
one of
the
the-
guy that the demon was trying to come into said no. That was a different guy.
The caster who originally said no is still there. He still wants to do the ritual for some reason.
He's just like, wait.
He got cold feet at the last second in the previous
at the altar.
ritual. And so he decides,
He was ready to
you know what? I'm really going to do it this time.
Commit to the bit. Commit.
So he has his buddy who is still there, who apparently is still okay with doing this ritual and killing him. So the caster does kill him, or does kill the second player character. The demon comes into the world, the apocalypse begins, and thus ends this night of horror.
Okay.
The players loved it. They raved about it. They, in character, wrote an account of everything that went down. And I have a copy of that saved in my Google Documents.
Aw.
Man.
So that if I ever want to relive the horrors of that night, I can.
God, you made a fan. You made 4 fans.
I must admit, I think it's quite interesting. They seem to do, like, they probably just sat down and were like, all right, what does the Game Master want us to do? All right, let's do the exact opposite of everything.
So after the game was finished, one of them confessed that they had cheated. They had looked at the paper that had Evil Necromancer written on it and assumed that that was the person who they were talking to, and that metagaming
Ruined the game.
ruined the entire game, set everything off into this horrid chain reaction of stupid decisions and death.
Or made the game fantastic, depending on who you ask.
Or made
And
the game
absolute
fantastic.
best.
I have not run a game for this group since.
I even read one more.
It was not for that group. It was not. We had different players.
Oh, okay.
I think my favorite part of that was definitely, the ritual goes off without a hitch. Demon tries to enter the mind, and despite being, like, very much okay with it 5 seconds earlier, I don't know. I think I'm gonna give me a couple seconds to think about it.
I'm just happy that demons have a firm, grounded understanding of consent.
More than we can say for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Shots fired.
Well,
That's interesting, though. So after all of that sort of wrapped up, I guess that brings up a question. So, as a game master, and this is open to everyone, do you feel that that the top priority should be the players having fun, or do you feel like, you know, it's not worth torturing yourself to achieve that goal? Like, this is very much so a case where your players had an absolute blast, but for you, it was a night of hell.
Yes.
And so I'm curious what everyone else thinks. You know, is that worth it?
If it's a one-shot, I would have acquiesced and done what you did. If it were a real campaign and people just started acting erratically, or one player started being a jackass and everyone else was not having a good time because of it, no, I'm not going to let one player have some power fantasy just so or allowing the others to suffer. But I guess if they were all into it and it was a one-shot or a short campaign, wouldn't be a whole lot of time out of my life. All right, that's fine.
I think I'd also be willing to, because there's definitely been, you know, sessions in an overall campaign where I sort of lost control of the players, and they ended up sort of doing whatever they wanted. They all had an absolute blast, and I'm over there, like, tearing up my game notes, like, well, this is useless. And, you know, I think that it's not great, you know, especially, I remember that first ever campaign that I ran. You know, I would spend hours working on my game notes, really just trying to detail out a story. And I don't do that anymore. Now I'm lucky if I even put down anything into a notebook before the session starts. I remember how frustrating I felt, or how frustrated, just seeing all my hard work go out the window. And I think maybe that was some of what you were experiencing as well, Clayton.
Very much so.
You know, but again, just like your players, my players had a blast in those sessions where I kind of lost control and they did whatever they wanted. So I really don't know where I stand on it. I think it's hard for me to really come down. I think, like KP said, kind of depends on the circumstances.
For a campaign, no. The game master has to enjoy themselves. The game master puts in so much more effort into the game than the players. The game master puts in more effort and thought into the game than all the players combined, because the game master is responsible for the rules. Whether or not any of the players know the rules, it is ultimately the game master who is responsible for the rules. It is the game master's responsibility to give the players something to play with. But if the players just time after time take what the game master gives them and just makes it miserable on the game master, it's disrespectful. I would not play in a group long term that I felt that would just take everything that I've worked hard on and just throw it away.
Right, because what would even be your motivation for that?
Right.
What bugs me about that, in fact, is what is the motivation? Even if you've never played a game before, I feel like most people could understand the social cues of, oh, my actions here are making everyone else not have a great time. Maybe I shouldn't do that. Although, perhaps the fantasy, this is a game, anything goes, I'm going to become a murder hobo, takes over, and you can do these things and not worry about social cues, because it's just a game, bruh. Just a game.
Did you stroke out? Because I think I stroked out.
But yeah, I think that I've never had a desire to do it, because I get really, you know, uncomfortable when I see, oh man, like, my players aren't having a good time, I gotta step it up. Or, I, as a player, did something that upset another player. I'm just going to not tell her I killed her for 11 months. Or something like that. But I guess some people...
That confrontation in an upcoming podcast.
In a previous
podcast.
Well, I wasn't there to have Haley's wrath unleashed upon me.
Oh, true. Oh, you mean... Okay.
So that's coming up, I'm sure.
Oh, that's exciting.
But you gotta duke it out.
But a lot of people aren't good at noticing social cues, so they'll just keep going, because they just don't care. Their happiness prevails over others.
Well, and I think that there's something about playing a game, maybe, that people think, I can let go. I don't need to worry about those social cues. Yeah. I can just kind of finally do whatever I want without any consequences, maybe.
I think experience plays a big part in this as well. I notice, and, you know, not all new players are going to do this, obviously, but to newer GMs, it happens a lot more because asshole, you know, experienced players think they can take advantage of them, and or, you know, newer players sometimes, you know, go into that murder hobo mode, where they just, you know, we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but all of a sudden you have this huge world that is literally reacting to your every movement. That kind of goes to your head, and you want to do what you want to do, even if it's kind of like, ruin other people's good times sometimes. So I think that's something I've noticed.
I kind of wonder if it depends too on how much people are getting into their characters. Because I think if you're really playing your character and you're taking on their mindset, then the consequences of the world you're in matters to you. But if you're not, if you're just looking at it like you said as playing a game, you're not really getting into the head of the character, then it's just like, what do these consequences matter?
It's like the player of Grand Theft Auto who decides to like complete missions and like, you know, kind of role play a bit. Me, when I play Grand Theft Auto, I just follow all the traffic rules. I'm just Johnny Lawful. I parallel park. I stop at stoplights. Other people just go around killing everyone and everything and using the cheat codes to get grenade launchers. I feel like that's equivalent
That's
here.
a lot of information about Grand Theft Auto that I've just never had to interact with before.
I think, you know, too, before we go on to the next story, there's this idea of people whom, you know, Beth, you talked about how some people who aren't as invested in their characters are maybe more likely to do this. I think, in addition to that, there are some people who get so invested in their characters, they get into their mindset of, damn the consequences, the real-world consequences, like, I'm going to play this character, you know, how this character is meant to be played, even if it's going to disrupt my relationships with people outside of the game. And I've definitely been in situations where that's happened before as well. And I think that's unfortunate, you know, that's kind of a fine line you have to walk, is do you know, commit so much to a character, because the excuse is then, you know, oh, this is a role-playing game, I'm just role-playing.
Yeah, this is what my character
this is what my character would do. Like, that's a fine line. You gotta, if you're gonna commit to that, you know, I guess be expected to have some backlash, especially if you're playing a pretty rough around the edges character that's gonna cause some friction.
Or the opposite, in fact. I have a very short story about a 3.5 game I played pretty early in my gaming career. It was a group of very experienced people. I was not super experienced, and we had another not very experienced player. It was a large group, 10 players, 3.5, a very, very experienced, skilled DM who was making it work. And what ended up happening is, instead of like a kind of edgelord character who, you know, I'm gonna play this edgy guy who just pisses people off, and that's what I do in character, don't take it personally.
Nothing personnel, kid.
Yeah, teleports behind you. He was a straight-laced man of God. He was a paladin. And he was that, I know that's also an archetype, but like just the asshole paladin player who refused to let anybody have any fun. He was also a pretty charismatic person in real life, and so he had some pretty convincing arguments. Despite the best efforts of this very good DM, this person managed to have this very fun, large, 10-person D&D game fracture, and the group who wanted to follow the paladin ended up sticking with the DM proper, and the other 5 of us, it was pretty even split, who wanted to be more like kind of chaotic good, even, like not evil characters, but just not perfectly to the letter of the law. There was no place for us in that campaign anymore, and so one of the 5 stepped up to be a DM, and we kind of continued that as like a separate thing for a little while.
Interesting. I've never really heard of a situation like that.
It didn't last super long. It ended up, the whole thing crumbled eventually. You know, it was the twilight years of that empire. But for a while there, it worked okay.
I mean, that does feel like best case scenario if the game's gonna crumble.
All right, would we like to get into another story? You already kind of told one there, KP. I'm not sure if you'd like to tell a more in-depth tale.
Oh, I've got a motley crew of
stories to tell.
So, yeah, sure, I can tell another one, kind of along the same vein of a group of players, or like the actions of a player or two kind of create an impasse in the campaign. Clayton was DMing a very cool setting called Planescape. Spin off into a video game, like very classic setting. You could talk a little more about it if you wanted to kind of briefly.
Planescape is the first campaign setting I ever bought for Dungeons & Dragons. It is absolutely awesome. You should buy it and play it and download it. There is Planescape, or Planeswalker.com, and Planescape Torment, the video game that was based on it, was just remastered and released a few months ago.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
That's cool. Well, that's awesome. I gotta check that out. So in Planescape, built in, there are factions that inherently do not get along. One of the challenges we were tasked with as players was to pick a faction, even if they were to butt heads, and stick with it. You're in this multiverse setting where there's lots and lots of crazy stuff happening. Our adventuring party had 3 people, all in different factions. One was a very kind of Nietzschean Superman-type figure played by Jordan. One was could accept no charity, was their part of the tenet, one of the tenets of their faction, played by a person who's not been on this podcast yet, actually. And my character was what was the name of that faction?
I'm trying to remember which faction you were in.
The one where you have a bunch of different experiences and you collect them in these spheres and you could sell them.
The Sensates, the Society of Sensation.
My character just wanted to, experience everything because that would lead to enlightenment. Anyway, the 3 of us was one other player as well, but I don't think he was there that day. So the 3 of us had kind of completed an arc, had a great time, maybe 10 sessions, maybe less than that, like 8 sessions-ish of this campaign. And on the first session...
Wait, I want to correct one thing. You were in between arcs. You were told to go to a town and wait for 3 days before you knew the next plot point would reach you on its own.
Right. And this was the first session where we had, quote, free time. We had finished an arc, we were in between, it was a short amount of waiting time. Literally all the players had to do was tell you, we bum around town for 3 days, let's get on with it.
I explicitly stated this, that you will just have to say, we're just going to wait around town for 3 days. You don't have to do anything if you don't want to.
But we decided to run a grift.
Well, that's like an escalation.
We knew that there was a mass exodus of people heading out of a city that was being besieged by an enemy force, and we basically set out to take advantage of
refugees.
I was going to call them
down on their luck.
They were refugees.
Yeah.
And what we decided to do is set up a scam where the 2 players who were not myself, one was this big bad barbarian and one was this agile, like, assassin-y type fighter. And we come across a caravan of merchants and their guards. They had been traveling, doing a ring around the different like kind of parts of this weird world, and they were about to come home to their families. And all we were gonna do was set up a rigged fight. The elf, the agile assassin versus the big, ogreish barbarian. And we were gonna take bets, and the fight was gonna be rigged, and we were gonna earn some money, and that was it. I was the ringleader, I was the charisma character, and so I'm like talking up this fight, and I'm like, hey, you guards, you've had a long journey, wouldn't you like to see some excitement? You merchants, you've made lots on this trip, wouldn't you like to, have a chance to gamble, make a little more? And everyone's like, yeah! And so we set this thing up, they ring the wagons, the guards are all there around in a big circle, the 2 fighters are in place, I climb up on top of the wagon train and I start calling out the fight. And then things go very poorly. Without telling me...
without telling anyone,
my 2 compatriots, that I had been through quite a bit with, frankly, decide they're gonna murder everyone. The thing is, my character had some sense of loyalty to these 2 people, and so at first, the 2 fighters, they play this thing where, like, one of them loses a weapon, and they're like, hey, I need a weapon, I gotta finish this fight, guards, who has money on me, throw me your sword. And so the character gets thrown a sword, and they keep fighting, the 2 in my party keep fighting, and eventually, one of them, like, takes a big backswing and accidentally chops one of the guards in the neck or something, and everyone's like, whoa, but they're like, oh, it was an accident, it's cool. And the guards are like, man, get him out of there, get him some medical attention, close the circle in, this is getting crazy. But they keep doing that until finally the guards realize, okay, they're just trying to kill us, this is not accidents. And I'm up there shouting like, no, everyone, remain calm, just take a step back. Okay. They're killing. Oh, they're shooting at my friends. Okay, someone's shooting at me. Okay. And so I like kill a couple in self-defense, and I see someone about to murder one of my friends, and so I kill them, and eventually we've murdered and just decimated all of the guards of this caravan, leaving the rich merchants to run and flee for their lives, I look at my two comrades and I'm just like, what the fuck? But the barbarian doesn't answer me. He just screams in bloodlust and chases off after the merchants across the fucking sands. He goes and so I have like minor magical abilities, and so I use a little bit of magic to trip the barbarian so that he falls and like doesn't quite get to this merchant. And then as he falls, he's distracted. He turns around and he looks at me, knowing that I did that. And so I'm like, why are you doing this? Let the man live. This is insane. He murders the merchant, and then he comes charging at me. And my character's only out here. I'm looking at the usually more reasonable elf, and I'm just like, mouth agape. What? Why? I'm looking at this massive hulking barbarian man charging at me from across the plain, just like getting louder and louder the whole time. And he's not running out of breath because he's a Superman. And so I decide to just get on my horse and set the entire wagon train on fire, and ride away. Leave these people behind. I have no part of this now. I can't do it. This is not within my character's moral spectrum. And then, as players, we all kind of stopped. And we looked at each other, and we looked at Clayton, and I just said, well, I don't feel as if I can continue this game with this character, because my character would never associate with the two of you again. And I'm happy to make a new character, or even retcon my character to make him, essentially, morally defunct. But basically, that was an impasse. That was something where looking back on it, I don't have any bad feelings about it. But it was one of the first times, I think, in a campaign where through some action we all kind of realized we can't keep role-playing these characters like this anymore. As it turned out, that Planescape game actually ended that night, which is quite sad. So someday we'll return to that setting, maybe. But
Absolutely. We're not going to stay away long from my favorite campaign setting.
What's with you and running like gambling scams that go askew, my guy?
I'm a good shot.
Okay.
That's a reference to a Star Wars game that we played where my character just decided to, instead of going to sleep and doing the plan the next day, go and try and gamble with the only property he had, which was our ship.
Which I was the pilot of.
But I owned it, so I could gamble with it.
For anyone unfamiliar, the Star Wars D20 system has a little function called a destiny point, in which you can have an overwhelming success when you spend it. However, the action that you spend it on becomes irrevocably tied to your destiny, essentially. So in this case, you start the game with a destiny, like a goal you want to fulfill, and when you spend that point, you end up accomplishing that, but whatever you're doing at the time is linked to it. So in this case, KP's character wanted to meet the Imperial starship captain that saved him from a life of...
I would just like to interrupt here and say this episode is actually recorded.
It is!
That's very true, actually.
And it may come into the actual plays once I get a chance to edit it. So,
No spoilers.
That's great. It's
No,
a really,
I don't want to
it's a
give
really
out
fun game.
spoilers for something that hasn't been released
That's
yet.
a good point.
We'll end it there, then.
Well,
Stay tuned next time.
the only thing I'm going to add is that two players spent destiny points saving KP's character's ass after gambling. Me being one of them. I'm just saying.
It's Lambo, man.
Anyway.
My character did not deserve any of this. She was so pure.
So are we going around the table?
Does anybody else have a story they want to share? And popcorn it.
I kind of want to talk about lesbians.
Lesbians! Do it.
Go ahead.
So break down what lesbian.
I put my head in my hand just trying to think of where to go from lesbians.
Special people.
So my very first time playing an RPG ever, actually, was a one-shot that KP ran.
The Narine 9, a Mars murder mystery.
Oh yeah, you remember so much more about this game than I do. All I can remember is...
Lesbians.
Lesbians, or space lesbians, if you will. So, the way I got into RPGs was our friend Haley, who's been on this podcast, basically forced me into playing a one-shot with these nerds here. And I really don't remember much of the game, but it was set on Mars and a murder mystery on a space station.
Colony, like a colony on the surface of Mars.
Thank you. What me and Haley did with our characters was they were in a committed relationship on this colony.
Committed.
They were committed. They were.
They should have been.
They were a monogamous couple. Thank you. Long story short, we had to leave Mars, and by had to, I mean we really, really wanted to, or at least I did. And as we were leaving, as we were doing this like crazy scheme to leave Mars, none of which was scientifically accurate, I'm sure. A lot of like slingshotting with
We were
gravity
abandoning
happened.
somebody, right?
Fuck you! Wait, are you trolling me?
Yes.
God damn it!
Anyway,
You got
KP has left the table.
anyway, we essentially abandoned Haley's character, which led to a lot of, as I'm sure.
I can't remember.
Why did we abandon her character? That's a really great
There was
question.
more than one,
I don't
including
think
your character.
I don't think anybody really liked that character, like within the game. I loved, I mean, I personally loved her, but
The in-story reason why people got left behind was there was not enough seats.
oh my gosh, you're right.
Right.
So, we don't actually. I don't personally actually leave her behind. She's like.
Actually, there wasn't enough delta V. I could add seats. You could remove seats. It was the
I'm
issue
trying
of thrust to weight
to
ratio.
tell my story, my guy. my stunted and stressful story. As we're leaving, she's trying to like climb into the spacecraft, and I'm like trying to pull her in. Like I really am trying my best to get her into the spacecraft, and yet she doesn't quite make it. In fact, what had happened was I pushed her off of the spaceship to save myself. As you would do in that situation, right? Dire circumstances. She was very upset at me, and to this day brings up the concept of lesbians and how I abandoned her and betrayed her, even though I kind of convinced them to go back and get her, so she was fine in the end, I'm pretty sure.
Might have heard some of that on the last episode, actually,
Oh, maybe.
in which Haley was recounting the many betrayals
Yeah.
that she has suffered.
Particularly for me, I always end up betraying her for some reason.
So, would you say that this concept
Of lesbians.
ruined your experience in like the game overall?
No,
or was
that-
it more of an out of character thing?
It was most definitely an out of character thing. She made me cry, actually, because she was so upset and angry at me. We were new friends at the time. Like, I don't really know where all of this emotion came from. But like she was darling about it. It was really funny in retrospect. But she did cry, and then that made me cry because I'm a soft squish. But yeah, no, it was a really fun game, and like I mean, I'm still here, and that was the first RPG I ever played. So like, I guess something happened, right? Maybe it was very stressful at the time, though. Like the amount of yelling of the words lesbians that in the launchpad that night. Wow.
It was something.
Actually, she still yells at me whenever she's angry. She just looks me dead in the eye and she yells lesbians, and I'm just like, that's really dramatic to do in a Wendy's, my girl. Like,
So there can be. It sounds like we're examining that there can also be events that occur in an RPG that may not like ruin the RPG itself for you, but you definitely have some stress outside of the game through either an action or something that happened. And I think that's pretty interesting as well. I think that's something that kind of gets overlooked a little bit.
Don't ruin friendships, ruin RPGs.
oh yeah, I still look back at that game with like fondness, and I still love Haley. Like she's still like one of my closest friends. But wow, it's lesbians.
I have a handful, and by a handful I mean 2 stories. One which involves running a game, and the other in which I was a player. I'll give as much as I can the abridged version of both. The running of the game, I attempted a couple years back to run a Geist game. It's New World of Darkness. It's the concept, for those that don't know, is you are playing someone whom dies. However, at your moment of death, as you're about to pass into the great beyond or into the void or whatever you may believe, you're approached by a pretty powerful spirit that gives you a second chance at life. However, the condition being, when you come back, You're going to have some spiritual powers. You're going to be able to like see into the veil, the where spirits reside in the real world. And it's also going to sort of sit inside your head, and it may talk to you a lot. It may not. It may make you want macaroni and cheese, or it may want you to go on a homicidal rampage. Nobody knows. One or the other.
That's a variety.
Two extremes.
Or kill your parents.
Question mark?
Could be. Whichever. And so that was the concept of the game. However,
Geist is my favorite RPG system by far. I love it a lot.
it's a very intriguing concept, and prior to this, I was in a Geist game myself. This is what inspired me to run it. And it went relatively well, all things considered. And so I thought I could do it. However, this is also at a time in my life in which I was trying to sort of expand my social groups, and I really wanted to hang out with more people, and so I started pitching this game to people, and I had a bunch of people interested, and I sort of got in over my head, and before I knew it, there were 12 people sitting in this room waiting for me to run a Geist game. Now, 12 is I think everyone at the table would agree, a pretty hefty number to run a game for.
And Geist.
Particularly
But
Geist.
with Geist, for those that don't know, not only are you responsible for NPCs as the game master, you're also responsible for running everybody's Geist. It was essentially that I was running a game for 24 people, not 12. And
Terrifying concept.
this lasted one session in
Give
which...
it two. I remember, because we added more people on, because one was a human.
Alright, I guess then 1 to 2 sessions. I don't really remember the exact number. However, it was a complete and utter clusterfuck.
I remember.
A clown fiesta.
A clown fiesta, if you will. We had characters from all different walks of life. Some people were playing goofy concepts. One player in particular was playing a Italian mob man that couldn't talk, so he just didn't talk for the entire session, but he was also the most active. He would always just walk away from the group, and he'd like smash windows, and no one knew what he was doing. I didn't know what he was doing. I don't think the player knew what he was doing.
Oh, I love that.
And then there was
We had a stripper, all the classic staples of just a crazy game.
We
and
had
I'm
one human, too. He was the adventurer that was just like, what's going on? And
That's
then just
true.
got into a bunch of shit. Because he couldn't see anything.
We had someone who, despite this being a Geist game, insisted upon playing a human, wanted to play a hunter.
I feel like that's being the only vegan in a friend group.
A little bit.
Wow.
Are you?
No, not a bad thing. It's just, there's a lot of things you can't do.
It's true. Everyone else was like being able to see the ghost that we're fighting, and this guy would be like just shooting his shotgun at random because he couldn't see the ghost because he was a human.
It was kind of like that horror movie we watched.
Yeah.
And,
Hey, bro, you want some fruit snacks? No, they have gelatin. Boom.
So the ghost would always just wreck him because he could never see him. But he'd keep coming back. He was just a glutton for punishment.
Swinging in the air.
Yeah, he would just be like punching in the
I love
air,
that.
trying to hit stuff. All these other things were happening. Essentially, the game was just going down a very steep slope. We couldn't even get into the plot because there was so many interruptions and people just leaving the group to go do their own things. And so I eventually just cut it mercifully short because I just couldn't handle it. And I think I learned a valuable lesson that day about
Max capacity.
exactly.
Cool is at capacity.
My second story is one in which I was a player. It was a very small game. It was 3 players and 1 GM. And it was a strictly evil game. It was 3.5 fantasy setting. We were all attempting to basically, none of us had really played, well, one of us had played an evil character before. I had actually never had a chance to play someone who was just a bastard, really just out there being a murder hobo. And so I kind of wanted the experience, and a friend offered to run the game.
I love that special appeal of becoming a murder hobo.
I feel like,
calls to
well,
you.
I mean, okay, but I think when you look at RPGs, that I know that's a sort of a bad stereotype that people envision, but at the same time, like, you gotta do it once.
I wasn't even really being sarcastic. Like, I was being serious.
So
If the GM
Can't kill
especially
people
knows
in
that's
the
what you're going for, then I feel like that's okay.
Yeah, and
It's
we
like
all
everybody agrees. That
we all sort of talked about how we wanted this game to be an evil. We were all going to play like evil characters, and sort of just go from there. And so to start off, we have one player was playing it was a battle mage, I think was the class. He was sort of really good at magic, but also had some minor martial ability. And he decided he wanted to play a lawful evil character. Which, again, an evil character, but it sort of started to clash with the other two characters. I was playing a prototype character for my current character in our fantasy game that we play here, in which I was a barbarian, I was sort of a Viking character, neutral evil, and the other player was playing an elven archer, kind of a rogue, also neutral evil. And the two of us had picked neutral evil because we felt it gave us the most flexibility in this evil game. Like, if we wanted to be murder hobos, we could, but if we also had a rare moment of mercy or something, for whatever reason, it let us have that flexibility. The other player, the one playing the battle mage, came in knowing none of that. He made it quite clear he wanted to play a conniving, manipulative character that pulled our strings and sort of ran things behind the scenes, and just a real power broker. And unfortunately, I wish we had talked about this beforehand, because this game got off to a fun start, but very rough, in which we were all on a prison boat, and hijinks ensued. We all escaped. We made it to the nearby island and all got arrested. As you do in an evil game, you always end up in prison a lot. But quickly the party started to break down, in which the GM wasn't the strongest at keeping control of his players, and he had a vague plot that he wanted us to follow, but me and the other neutral evil character wanted to just have fun. We wanted to just run around, do whatever we wanted, make up our own plot, essentially. And the lawful evil character was very intent on not even following the plot, but setting up a power base and sort of playing a different kind of evil character than the rest of us sort of anticipated. Things broke down quick. There started being in-character fights that then turned into out-of-character fights. And eventually the party just completely fractured. Me and the other neutral evil character decided that we were just going to leave. And so we ended up just knocking him unconscious and leaving him in the street. And we tried to just leave and walk away. He didn't like that. Essentially, the last and final session of this game was all-out war between this battle mage and my barbarian and the other character's rogue, in which he made it quite clear he killed several people, like NPCs that we had collected, and he made it quite clear that he was coming. He was gonna take us down, and payback's a bitch, as they say. So the final session was essentially him attempting to find us, and we couldn't take him in a straight fight. He was a battle mage, and his magic was pretty powerful, and 3.5 battle mages are pretty OP, I think. And so essentially, we were trying to find a way to neutralize his magic as best we could, and so there was this weird thing going on in which we were all looking for ways to defeat the other people, and it boiled down to we ran into him in a tavern. He two-shots the rogue. I managed to get on top of him. I was always talking about how, I do enough damage to kill you with one hit. Didn't happen. He casts a magical spell in which he's going to, seal my character away in a magical ring. And he starts gloating. He stands up from the table, and he's going, fuck you, I win, go to hell. And I kind of just start laughing. And I point to the rulebook, in which this spell has a 2-turn effect thing where it would take 2 turns to go into effect. And I'm still alive, so I just butcher him the next turn. And kind of going off of the earlier topic of, having a game sort of bleed into real life, this guy flipped the table and stormed out. He was pissed. We're still friends now, but I remember at the time, I didn't think it was gonna last, because he was just... No one won, because despite the fact that I killed him, that spell still went into effect 2 turns later. So, the elf rogue, she's a smoldering husk sitting at a table. This guy's without a head, and there's just this ring sitting on the ground, which my barbarian was forever sealed within. And it was just such a weird end to a game, and it really sucked that it went that way. I think it could have been a lot of fun, but it just turned into an all-out war.
Let that be a lesson to you, kids. Evil doesn't pay.
Don't be a murder hobo. Or at least if you are, make sure everyone else is playing a murder hobo first.
Which is untrue, because when we get to good stories, that's actually the evil campaign that we played was my favorite ever.
Do you want to go for...
You want my bad stories? I've got 2 bad stories that aren't super long, but they both have to do with being a girl.
Snaps
The
to
first one... the first one was my very first game that I ever played. and I think,
Played
I'm
as a
not going to
player.
say it, I played as a player, and you were also a player as well. One of the other players that was one of, like, Clayton's friends, I mentioned this game before in a previous podcast where it was the one where I played a centaur and, like, literally did not fit into the setting. But at one point, somebody said something about asking where Clayton's character was, and Clayton's friend made a comment, and this was right when, like, Clayton and I had not been dating for very long, and his friend said, Clayton's off eating a centaur. Ew. Yeah. So
No.
I was
Not just my friend at the time, my best
your
friend.
best friend. Yes. Yep. And so that, I mean, obviously made me seriously uncomfortable for the rest. And I mean, I was super, I mean, I'm still not super outgoing, but I was really shy at the time, like to the point where one of the other, players told me afterwards, she was like, you're so shy, I just feel bad for you. Like, you just look like you're having a terrible time. I'm like, that helps, thanks. But my other one was, my other bad story was an overnight session that we played when I was in college with 12 players. And I played a bard. We had a couple of decent guys in the group, but a large number, and I think I was the only female player
Yes.
in the group. And the guys, like, started, like, every time I would talk about, like, singing a song, they started, like, trying to get me to take off my clothes and, like, dance on tables and stuff.
That's classy.
So, yeah, I just basically laid down and went to sleep at one point. I was like, I'm done with this game. You guys can do your own thing.
I have a couple other stories, but I'm going to just tell really quickly. One absolutely terrible session where, thank God for my players because they made it fun. That was the most recent Fate Accelerated game that I ran. We replayed this just a couple of months ago. It was terrible because I'd had a bad day at work. I had agreed to run this game last minute, and I said, okay, you guys give me elements of the world, I'll create it into a semi-coherent world, and then you guys can make characters in it and have this adventure.
I'm sorry, I'm just remembering this game now.
Well,
Super weird.
yeah.
Well, KP described it as he said he came into it about halfway through and it was like entering a fever dream.
That's accurate.
I recorded this, but this recording will never see the light of day.
Good.
Because I do not want to have my worst performance as a game master ever put out into the ether. But I just wanted to share with everybody that I feel like I have grown so much as a game master over the years. I feel like I've gotten really good at it. Mm-hmm. But that session, having happened so recently, really struck me deep as to showing me that I'm really not as good as I thought I was. Mm-hmm. And, well, it took me down a few pegs because I had a good bit of hubris.
To be fair, we were giving you some pretty weird shit to try to work with.
Oh yeah, there was a mess, like, collectively.
The next story is just, there's no particular incident that happened. It was just a case where I was the game master for a 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons game. We had 3 players. We played Sunday mornings because that was the only time that all 4 of us were available. One player was chronically high, incredibly high. The other player slept
During the game?
during the game.
Oh.
The third player was actually engaging with me. And it was just the fact that, for all intents and purposes, I was running a game with just me and this other guy in Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, which I don't particularly like game mastering in. I have said I will never game master a 4th edition game again. Not because it's a bad system, it's just because it is absolutely not what I want in a game system. Now, not all of my horror stories are as me as a game master. I have one where I was a player. I could do nothing in this game. We were all 13th level characters. I was a mage, and we were playing 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons. And for everybody who knows 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons, a 13th level mage, or a 13th level wizard, is the complete opposite of a character who can do nothing. Those types of characters can do anything, They have the first 7 levels of spells
I
available.
was gonna say, that
to
spell
them.
book's pretty in-depth.
Take a
Yes.
look. It's in a book.
Play a
But-
wizard.
The problem was the game master. He cut me off at every turn as far as trying to do things, to the point where, and to add insult to injury, he killed off my familiar, which I had killed it off very early in this 13th level campaign. Irreparably gone. Built my character around being able to use my familiar to do most of my cool things. I got to the point where I did some very bad character things where I just decided, fuck it, I'm gonna mess this story up. To the point where I would polymorph into a dragon and just tear up towns. But the game master's pet wizard NPC was always there to stop me. And that, just the fact that I was completely ineffective in that game, I feel like we were all pretty ineffective. There was the particular game master, he had a story he wanted to tell. We were there to facilitate
Right.
the story that he had planned.
Like, he had one solution figured out for each problem, and if you did not get that one solution, you were done. Like,
Yeah.
that he
very
would just
much
be
so
like,
power
no, right, yes. That's a very good.
Basically, I think sometimes, exactly as Clayton was talking about, sometimes a GM wants to tell a story, and there's a bit of railroading going on, and it's sort of more you're in a book than you are in a game. That's not my favorite type of game, necessarily.
Beth, I agree that it's not super fun when you have a GM that just really should be writing books and not involving other people in this storytelling and not at all facilitating. I don't know. Katie, I know that you've been in a campaign a couple times where you feel like you had no
Agency.
Player agency.
Yeah. And so that's no fun.
So, now that we've bitched for an hour,
Wait. I have one brief thing.
My God.
It's about. I want to talk more about grass. I want to talk about jazz cigarettes, weed,
The marijuana.
Yeah,
Cigarettes.
jazz cigarettes. It's a short story.
you mean the reefers?
Sometimes people like to do a marijuana or two.
It's illegal.
In certain parts of the country. I had a campaign I was running. It was my first time doing my own complete setting. I borrowed 3.5 D&D rules, but it was my own setting completely. Had a really great time with this campaign. I wish it would have ran longer, but the goofiest thing about it, I think, was my good buddy Jay. Shout out to you, Jay. Hope you're kicking it out there in LA. He wanted to play D&D. Had never played before. Man smokes a lot of that. Just that grass, that
That dank smoke.
and
God.
all right, so he made a character. He tried playing one session, got way too high, and just kind of was distracting, but in like a harmless, fun way. But he wanted to like be around every now and again, and so he decided of his own accord to become the weed wizard. Where
God bless him.
he would sit with us. Wasn't really an active player, but he would sit there and occasionally, when allowed, sometimes when not, he would just pop in, do something real goofy, well blazed off his mind, and then just pop out again. And it was great. It was just goofy.
I didn't realize that was Jay when you first brought it up.
And okay, Jay.
I don't know why I didn't
One more
think
thing
it was
about
Jay.
Jay.
I know, right?
He's a real tall, lanky fellow with long, luscious black hair, and he has a tendency to wear around this like paisley bathrobe. And I've known him for years, and it's the same bathrobe all the time. It's his house coat, I guess. And so
Is it his house coat? Because he'll wear it out in the woods as well.
That's true. You're right. It's
Angelic, even.
his coat. In he would stride, hair flowing, house coat billowing, and he would just offer everybody weed, smoke most of it himself, do some goofy shit, and then leave. That's it.
I remembered the Tick. Do you remember the Tick?
Oh god, I completely forgot about the Tick.
What?
Oh man.
There was this guy, I'm pretty sure Clayton found him in college by putting up just a poster somewhere, like, with his phone number, like, asking for new players. And so this guy shows up, and I don't remember what his actual name was, I don't want to say it
He wanted
anyway.
to go by Tick.
But he said, you can call me the Tick.
And everybody, like, agreed to that.
I was kind of like, okay. I mean, he was a really good role player. He was playing an orc, I think, and he was doing like a really good orcish voice and everything. But the problem was that every single time one of the rest of us would talk, he would be like, you should have a better voice than that. You really should be getting into character.
God.
And every single thing that each of us did, he had some sort of commentary about how we were lame and we weren't coming up with very good ideas and we weren't playing our characters right. And whenever we got done with the session, he was like, so, when's the next session going to be? And Clayton was just like, well, he's like, I think we have too many people.
Oh my god, those are the worst kind of
tiring,
people.
man.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, KP's been trying to get me to call him the Tick for years now. Hasn't called.
I also find that KP's trying to get us to do voices more often. I'm not.
Are you just the Tick?
Are you the
Was
Tick?
that you?
Wow.
He looks very sad, everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you all are the bloodsuckers, not me. There it is. I wasn't sad. I was like, the gears were
Thinking
turning.
of the burn.
I was trying to think of a burn. I did.
You're gonna keep my mouth shut.
All right. So, moving on to happy stories, or
Yes, we have to talk about some happy things before we end this. I'll start with the greatest campaign that I ever ran until possibly Abena. Abena's not over with, so I can't say that it's the greatest campaign I've ever run. But it is
lovely to
very
hear.
much in contention for it because it is unfinished at this point. I will go so far as to say that if Abena finishes, it will undoubtedly be the best campaign I've ever run.
If a
we could all die.
We could all die.
I suppose.
I could die in a car accident tomorrow on my way
Oh
to
my
work,
gosh.
so-
Okay, we're going into happy stories. What the heck?
The greatest,
We gotta level it out.
the greatest campaign I ever ran was in college. We played an evil campaign. Or, more accurately, I said we are playing a game where there is no assumption that you are going to play heroes, which automatically every character thinks, I get to play a villain. I had every character choose blindly from a series or from several folders that I had.
Yeah, quote unquote at random.
Yes, I had actually tailor designed all of these characters for the players. The group of people I was playing with, I can't say guys because my wife was in the group.
Yes.
It was the greatest group I've been in
like
up until that point. Everything about that campaign just fell into place.
Oh my gosh. Let me just say real quick that that's my favorite too. And Clayton had me playing a succubus, which based on my past experiences you would think would be horrible, but literally no rude comments the entire time.
Everyone was very respectful to how you wanted to play the
Exactly.
character.
Everybody was awesome, and that's exactly the same with the current group that I'm in. Like, you know, like I have no fear about anybody being a jerk.
Congratulations,
It's
guys.
awesome.
We did it. Sexism is over.
Close the book.
D&D will save the world.
All right, well, let's go all over.
Okay, sorry.
The point that I knew that this was the best campaign I was running was when a bunch of shit had gone down and Beth's character had gotten separated from the group at the end of a session. At the next session, we played her coming back into the group. She comes in. All the player characters had amnesia at the beginning of the campaign. There was plot reasons as to why this was going on. But her character comes back, walking beside the paladin who they had just fought the previous session and who she had basically disappeared with in the middle of the fight, and tells everybody, "Hi, this is my husband from my past life." And the abject shock and awe on all of the player characters' faces, or all the players' faces, is what I have been aspiring to in every single game I have ever run since.
That's the one guy goes, "What? No."
Only he was much more animated than that. So that's the greatest game I have run.
That's all. That's exactly what I wrote down. That exact thing that you just said.
What you mentioned earlier, pieces fell into place just perfectly. What exactly did you guys mean?
Well, all of the characters were written to be just evil people who I had built in a potential redemption arc for each one of them if they wanted to grasp it. Not everyone did, but there was all of the players getting into their characters and discussing why they thought in character certain decisions would be made. Every time we all got together, everybody was just clicking. Everybody was in character. Whenever they tried to figure out the plot that was going on, they were throwing out such great ideas that I unapologetically changed my plot because it was their ideas about what was actually going on were better than mine.
Okay.
At the end of the entire campaign, everybody came away like absolutely loving what we had all done. It's something that we all reference. Like, not all of us are together now, but a few of us still see each other. It's one of those campaigns that we still talk about how much fun we had at the time.
It's a positive experience.
And that was 15 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's really just stuck with you guys.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's lovely.
I think one of my more recent, anyway, very memorable good experiences was kind of like you just said, players coming up with better ideas than the DM. I owe it to the players for thinking of these things that made this one-shot so great. It was, 10 people write about people that I'd never played before, people that were from different social groups in that, like, circle my life, and we all got together, and we were going to play this game where each person, I should say it was fate accelerated, and each person created one thing about the world. All of the things that each person went around and said about the world, we incorporated. Fortunately, my players made it very easy for me to have a lot of fun as a DM and throw together a world that kind of clicked and made sense. One of the things that I like doing is different voices. Not the tick.
That was not what made the tick a jerk.
But I like doing voices. One of the players, I forget who, said that in this world they want everyone at birth to have a familiar that can talk. And so I got to do the voice of everyone's familiar, and everyone got to tell me what they wanted the voice to sound like, and that was very, very cool. We didn't get to finish the campaign because it just went
long.
Than
It was
we were
like
expecting.
5 hours.
And so I kind of had to accelerate it and just tell everybody this is what was going to happen. You
And
guys were
also,
on track.
everyone was in from out of town, so we couldn't have done it later.
It's a big group.
But like everyone had a blast, I think. Gosh, I'm trying to remember the other things. So it was everyone has familiars that can
Took
talk.
place on Halloween night.
Took place on Halloween night.
Cyberpunk City, was that this one as well?
I think so.
Yeah. Monsters are real?
Monsters, fairies, ghosts, like all of the kind of paranormal stuff you can think of is just real and accepted. People know about it.
Oh, there was a weird one. One of the stipulations was that the New World Order had taken effect, and we were living in like a post-NWO world.
Yeah.
Or something like that, right?
Yeah, and so like
a ruling elite rule us in like...
an elite ruling class, like an oligarchy. And what ended up doing was having the Halloween thing. Basically, the big plot device is that on Halloween, everybody is massively partying, simultaneous Halloween parties, and everyone but the party gets turned into whatever their costume is.
Oh, yeah!
And it was a lot of fun. Really, really cool to see a group of players that some of them didn't know each other very well, some of them were very new to the game, just have a blast with it. That's pretty cool.
I met Kenny.
It's true.
I was also actually going to bring up this game because it was an absolute blast. And it's like one of my favorite memories of like all of those people and RPGs. But also, I guessed the ending, which was just really exciting because I've just never been able to do that before.
The big ending is that the entire world was a simulation ran by Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Kyle's just continuing that Elon Musk
No,
fandom.
this was definitely in our Elon Musk kick where we would like constantly have discussions about his theories on like what the actual world was and how it was a simulation and, you know, mind fucking Katie over here.
By the way, Elon,
Oh, God, that's right.
please hire me. Please.
Elon, if you're listening to this. Can I call you Elon?
I'll call you Mr. Musk.
I doubt he likes being called Mr. Musk. Like, I don't think anybody would want to be called that.
You know, KP has always been real good at doing voices, and that one shot really let you shine in that. Like, we gave you some weird shit. Like,
Doug the Golden Retriever.
That's true. Mine was a cat that only communicated with me with the same tone Tom Hardy uses in one specific scene in The Revenant, in which he looks, it's at the very beginning of the film. The main characters are being attacked by some Native Americans. They're fur traders. So as this fight's going on, Tom Hardy's character kind of just looks at the camera and goes, "Grab the pelts!" And so that line was how I wanted my familiar to talk for the entire campaign, and I can safely say KP nailed it quite well.
Yeah, mine was a bird, a raven or a crow, with the voice of Tom Felton, who played Draco Malfoy in the Harry Potter series.
Oh my god.
Another friend had also a bird, I believe, in which they just used the Palpatine voice from Star Wars.
Peter had a frog that
I was
was
gonna ask
lame,
about that.
like, and just didn't talk except for like
A scream.
yeah, like just like a like,
And he would just kind of
Did you do the scream, or did Peter do the scream? Because
I don't remember. It might have been a team effort.
a good game.
Yeah, good game.
It was a lot of fun.
Good one shot, as they say.
A lot of weird interactions with the new friends. It's fine.
For me, there's a lot. I've had a lot of really good RPG experiences over the years. And so it's really hard for me to successfully narrow sort of, if I had to pick for being a player, very early on in my sort of role-playing career, I'm not getting paid for this, unfortunately.
Yet.
Yeah.
I haven't launched the Patreon yet.
Woo!
Sponsors
That didn't
also,
blow up
please. Audible
the mic.
will push those audiobooks for you.
Anyway, I had joined into a it was a Fire Emblem game based off the strategy game series. I'm not sure if anyone at the tables had any experience with that.
Nerd.
Okay. Well, the basic core concept for those that don't know is you take the role of usually a noble or a tactician retainer to a noble, and you run an army. And you it's a strategy game, you're fighting against other armies, and there's, a very rudimentary rock, paper, scissors combat with weapons, and it's a strategy game. And a friend had taken it upon themselves at the time to completely overhaul the Final Fantasy role-playing system into a Fire Emblem game. Which took a lot of work. Vivian, props, if you ever hear this, props to you, because you did it. You did it, girl. But essentially what ended up happening over time, we played for a while, but we slowly sort of started to... It was just a slow burn game in which we all started with a very small army, a handful of characters, and we slowly built. We slowly recruited more people. There was a huge map. We all started at various points. There was maybe five people total in the game. We all started on various corners, and we all had to unite to sort of stop a big bad. But what sticks with me about this game, and why it's one of my many favorites, and why the one that stuck with me the most, is there was such a progression with essentially becoming the leaders of a country. And seeing this small army, that started off with you and 3 other people, sort of build and expand, and you create sort of these connections with other PCs and NPCs, and you forge deals. And I'm not a big person that likes macro games like that, usually. But I had so much fun in that game. I was running a liberation army. My country was being occupied by another country that had a PC. And I remember when we finally met in character, there was all this tension. Everyone's like, oh no, this is going to be our first PC versus PC combat. But there was just a very real talk, and we both played our characters well, and were able to sort of overcome our issues and unite. And, the game, I think, didn't end up finishing, but the hope was by the end of the game, we would all just have our own countries, essentially, and that'd be the end game. It was a lot of fun to sort of have that sense of progression and build up. Finally, the favorite game that I've run was actually one Lenina and KP were in. I ran an X-Files RPG.
Still running, excuse you.
It's been on hiatus for a long time. We finished the first major arc, and then one of our players had to leave. It was a small game. It was only 3 other people.
Let's hope our return is better than season 10 of the X-Files.
Ooh. Not a good thing.
Do you believe in burns?
Well,
No.
I'm not familiar with the concept. This game sticks out with me because, sort of like you guys were talking about, it sort of was everything kind of fell into place. There's the one minor mishap, and for me, and I know I've talked to you about this, and you don't feel that way, but the Chinese ghost prison session.
That's a concept.
Okay, it makes it sound like it's a prison for Chinese ghosts. It was not.
Yeah, that fair point. It was they were in a San Francisco prison in which the X-Files of the day, you know, the way the game worked was, there was the mythology sessions, there was also just random one-off sessions in which, you know, there'd be a monster of the week. And this particular monster of the week was supposed to be a Chinese ghost in a prison.
I love this eye contact you're getting here whenever you talk about ghosts.
Fair enough. And unfortunately, I had a great idea in my head, but I sort of just messed up the execution. But that was the only mishap I felt like in that entire campaign, and everyone's characters really came together, and sort of like relationships between both the PCs and NPCs, like not romantically or like just as friends and as a team, built up very organically. And I think that was what really sold this game for me.
It was the first campaign ever where I got an in-character girlfriend.
I think that's the first campaign I cried for.
Everyone got very invested, but not to like an unhealthy level. It was a very healthy level investment. Everyone was very excited to play each week. I got to tell some very creepy stories, and sort of just, I'm a huge, X-Files is my favorite show, full disclosure. You know, I love it a lot.
Disclosure, you say?
And honestly, it was a dream come true to be able to run that game. And so it sticks with me as one of my favorites, for sure.
I want to still play. If
Well,
we can get together.
Blame the other player.
I had personally a really good experience with a game that we ran in between sessions where we rolled random DMs and we kind of picked things together and we kind of did it in layers. And we decided to base the game, me, KP, and Haley actually were DMing it. And we decided to base it off of,
Making characters for... Betrayal. We based it off Betrayal.
We based it off of Betrayal, so like
board
each
game.
room was, and if you've ever played Betrayal of House on the Hill, it's a really fun, like, 5-player game where you get to build the map and go into each separate room and discover new and horrifying things. And that was basically the D&D map, and we were just pushing off of improv, off each other, and off
Because
the
we
players.
all made characters for each other. Nobody made their own character.
We all made characters. We all pulled each other's names. to
And then we
make
made characters for that
them.
person, which was delightful.
It was amazing.
The idea being to challenge people and have them get outside of their comfort zone quite a bit.
Or to just tease.
Or that, yeah.
Jordan got a character that was just teasing him.
It was, I think, a really good experience. We all just had a lot of fun, and I feel like the entire game just flew by, and the improv that was needed for that kind of game was intense, and we pulled it off, I think, really well. And it was the first time and the only time I've ever DM'd, which was pretty cool.
I think that the GMs all did a really great job in that game for sure. I know my personal experience with that game was a bit more of a mixed bag, I think, than your guys's, and that was mostly because I was dealt a stock character.
Who was your character?
She was a, like, software engineer.
Yeah.
But whom had a libido cranked up to, like, 200.
Yeah.
Oh,
And was just literally the character notes written on my sheet was, will fuck anything that she's interested in.
It took me a moment because I had to remember who made your character. And
then
when I
you
remembered,
remembered.
yeah.
And so, unfortunately, I was sort of sitting there like, well, I guess, you know, I don't want to make this a weird game, but my character notes as I stare at the sheet are literally just, you know, go sleep with people. So I'm sitting there like, great. Okay. But other than that,
you did get to sleep with somebody in a pentagram room.
I did, which was, you know, that's definitely a success. You know, just check it off the checklist.
I loved that game. Possibly because
it was a lot of fun, but
I had the delightful experience of getting a very intense and like detailed character from KP that I ended up absolutely loving and kind of changed the way I play RPGs. So like, thanks.
Man, an African warlord did that for you.
She was so cool though. I mean, another game that really changed the way I play RPGs was that Star Wars one shot you ran. Mm-hmm. That one, no offense, more so than this one because like I feel like that's the one we recorded, right?
yes, it is.
Yeah, and that
it's
one
out
you can,
there.
I feel like you can really like throughout that one shot see me like coming into my own as a as a player because like that was still when I mean I'm
New,
still kind of
yeah.
a new character, I'm a new player.
And you haven't really played face characters
Yeah, that was that. Yeah, no, almost for obvious reasons. That was a lot of fun, and I'm actually surprised you didn't bring it up because, like, you did really well dealing with our just absolute bullshit during that game.
It was for me, and the only reason I ended up picking the everyone pick an element of the world one shot was because I was trying to think of stuff I had DM'd. In terms of campaigns I've played that were just really fun, stars aligned, stuff went super well. Katie, I thought that your Star Wars game
Oh wow!
that may make it out
I
there
love you as a DM.
someday on the airwaves here.
I agree as well.
It was just so much fun. It was just like a romp through
And
space.
like we wrapped it up to the point where all of us were willing to do a
sequel.
like a
Sequel,
sequel
one
where
shot, yeah.
I can't give anything away either.
I know, but I want to tell about like our specific storyline and like the heartbreak. Oh my gosh!
We can't do it.
One
Tune in.
Yeah, it's exactly. One other sort of note I want to touch on real quick before we wrap up is sequel games, and because you just brought it up, you know. For me personally, another one of my favorite games that I ran was a sequel game to a previous campaign, in which everyone reprised their old characters, but it was 10 years in the future. I don't know about everyone else who's run a sequel game, but for me, that's so much fun. Like, it's so much fun having built a world in a first game and having a bit of a time skip, or, you know, and especially because characters will usually start off very unsettled, you know, and then by the time of the second game, all of those characters ended up in a city, and were all just adventurers, and like they had just the clothes on their back. One was the ruler of a kingdom, another was like a well-known like guide, and they all had investments in the world. And I think that makes you really do some fun storytelling and roleplay there, because, you know, they're not just murder hobos anymore, you know, they're respectable citizens, and, you know, they might have kids, or they might have taken on like an acolyte or an apprentice or something, and they might be in charge of an organization. I really think that's a cool storytelling thing, and that I have only done to this day one sequel game, but it was just a lot of fun. Like
You have
really
another one
enjoyed it.
just ready to be set up.
I do, and apparently we could do it. Another Star Wars one.
God, it'd be so good.
I have actually two more that I want to discuss as positives, both of which I was a player in. The first one was about 10 years ago. I was in a Vampire the Masquerade game that was run during the end of times, during Gehenna, when Vampire the Masquerade was ending and Vampire the Requiem was about to begin. White Wolf released for every book that they published, they had an end times campaign that basically wrapped up their world. In that game, I was playing a Gangrel. I was a brand new player in a group of 8. And what made that game so awesome was every single one of those other 7 players, storyteller and all players, welcomed me into the group, made me a part of this very connected group that they already were. I tend to be a shy person, and the fact that all of them engaged me personally in this story that was going on, I still fondly remember it as one of the greatest games I've ever been a player in. Definitely the greatest group I've ever just cold been introduced into an established group, that is. We were kind of semi-established, different people in this group who were just kind of brought in at different times, but that remains, for me, being brought in and made to feel welcome in a brand new group of friends.
Clayton, you really paid it forward briefly here, because when I was introduced to the Apocalyptia game you were running that had been going for quite a while, Trip introduced me to you guys, brought me in. That was my first time playing an RPG with an established group that had been going, and I also hadn't played an RPG in a while. And it's funny that you say that experience, you had, my side of it, and then later you were the DM that definitely facilitated a really cool. I felt very welcome, and so thanks.
I was actually going to say a similar thing, because as a completely new to RPG player coming into Hunter when y'all were playing it with characters that y'all have been playing for a while, with a group that you've been playing for a while with, and you just took me into the family. It was really sweet, and I'm still here, so obviously.
And we don't get any smaller anymore.
Unfortunately.
The other one I wanted to talk about is of particular relevance to our Abena game, because I have carried this character over from this other campaign into Abena as an NPC. So I'm going to give some of the backstory for that character because it's going to be important for something that's about to happen in the game. I was playing a character. What made this game awesome was how the game master allowed me to play this character. This character, the character's name was Gath. He was a necromancer. The reason why he became a necromancer was because on his wedding night, a bunch of ghouls came and attacked the wedding party, bit his bride, and she began to turn. So Gath bound her up and hid her in a tomb, essentially went out to learn whatever type of magic was necessary in order to bring her back to him. And this character became a necromancer. The reason why this was such an important character for me at the time was because my wife was sick, and I was kind of playing through some of the emotions that I was feeling at the time, kind of some of the helplessness, because at the time there really wasn't any hope on the horizon for us, for her and her disease. And I want to say that now that is very much changed. She is doing a whole lot better. But this character was really important because it allowed me to play through a lot of things that I was feeling and that I really couldn't express anywhere else. And I really enjoyed playing that character. And this campaign came to a conclusion, and while I loved it, it was also the most bittersweet I've ever felt at the end of a campaign, because at the end of this campaign, my character attained what he wanted. He had the power to make his wife whole again. But at the time, we were still in a pretty dark place. And it was really hard for me at the time. Now that we are doing so well, she is 100% better. I have brought this character over into our Abena game, which we're all going to discuss a whole lot more about on another podcast. But I really wanted to get that out there because there is going to be a point in the story where you guys all have a point. Your characters are all going to have the ability to make a very major impact in this character's life that I wasn't able to play out when I played this character before. So
we're all crying. Beth and Clayton, the four of us, when you were telling that story, were just like smiling very sweetly and wide-eyed and just like looking back and forth at the two of you. I looked around the table and saw everybody else was doing it. I didn't know that Gath had that history. I would not have expected that.
You're going to be learning that very soon in this campaign.
No metagaming allowed.
No, you can
Well, yeah,
No, you can metagame because my intention is to make it known to all of you. Because you guys are all going to have to make a choice about this. And I am going to love when this choice comes to you, you guys making the decision that is in front of you. I want it to get here so badly that I want to tease it this much and make you think about it for weeks.
No!
Because we are still a ways away from this point.
Damn it.
But I want you all to be as anticipatory of this as I am.
He really wants the...
Man, I had no idea that Abena was like a spiritual sequel. And I mean that in like the emphasis on spiritual sense, like it's clearly not a sequel. But I didn't know that you
like
had
a successor, not a spiritual successor. Not so much a sequel.
Well, yeah, I mean,
carrying on the torch.
Right. Like, I had no idea that you had pulled in stuff, because to us as a player, at least to me as a player, Abena has felt so organically unique to our group, because we made the world together.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that...
I was like,
What do you mean? No, it's good. It's really cool.
Sometimes I think about the Seraphim and just quietly sit there like, yeah, I made those creatures, didn't I?
Well,
Sometimes
anyway, I didn't know
think
that you had
about
brought
humans.
other stuff from the past into it. I think that's really
It is really cool.
I was just gonna say that Clayton is both the most wonderful and the most horrible person in the world.
I think we can all agree to that.
Well, guys, what do you say? We quit this bullshit. We start rolling some dice.
With tears in our eyes.
Cried.
We cried.
Oh man.
Oh, yeah.
Good stuff.
This has been a production of Alien Familiar Media. You can find past episodes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. This production is protected under a Creative Commons Attribution No Derivatives license. Music for this episode is Suburban Outlaw by Forget the Whale and can be found at freemusicarchive.org.